The Eight Immortals Travel East Chapter 9.
Imagine for a second that you are the ruler of a great sprawling kingdom.
Right, like the absolute pinnacle of human authority.
Exactly. You are the top of the food chain. And you spend your days managing the delicate balance of statecraft, passing laws, doing everything in your considerable power to keep your people safe and your borders secure.
And you're doing a good job, too.
Yeah, for the most part, you are succeeding.
Yeah.
The realm is peaceful. The citizens are content. You feel like you have everything under control. But then the ultimate security breach happens.
And it's not what you'd expect.
Right. It doesn't come from a hostile nation marching an army across your borders. It happens from within the deepest, most secure sanctuary of your own home. A monstrous, shape-shifting ox infiltrates your palace.
A literal monster.
A literal monster. And it physically kidnaps you, dragging you away to a cave. It imprisons your spouse in a freezing, desolate dungeon. And it brutally slaughters your elite royal guards without even breaking a sweat.
Just absolute chaos.
Complete chaos. And your supreme military commander looks at you and essentially admits that he is completely out of ideas. All your wealth, your status, your massive military apparatus, it's all utterly powerless.
So what do you do?
Exactly what do you do when every earthly tool has completely failed you? Well, you write it down in a formal document and you send it to the heavens.
Which is such a wild response.
It really is. But that desperate plea is exactly what happens in Chapter 9 of the classic Taoist text Journey to the East, or Dong Yu Ji. We are looking at this ancient narrative today, not just as a mythological action story, but as an intricate look at crisis management, the bureaucracy of divine beings, and the clash between mortal vulnerability and untouchable power.
Yeah, the situation you just described really represents the total collapse of the terrestrial chain of command. Because when earthly systems break down entirely, the mortal ruler is forced into this ultimate escalation. And the text we are examining today, it was written in the Ming Dynasty, but the concepts it wrestles with, accountability, institutional hierarchies, and what happens when the people holding the ultimate power are completely disconnected from the chaos on the ground.
It feels incredibly relevant today.
It feels remarkably contemporary. It forces us to examine what happens when the paradigm of power shifts so violently that your conventional defenses just become obsolete in an instant.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start with the epicenter of the crisis.
Yeah.
The Qilip de Qin, which, by the way, is a fascinating term in itself.
It really is, yeah.
Because it's often used in ancient China to refer to the Roman Empire or, to the great powers of the Near East. So it gives this kingdom a slightly exotic, massive scale.
A sense of real gravitas.
Exactly. So this king realizes his elite guards are dead. He is humiliated. But he doesn't just fall to his knees and weep.
No, he takes action.
He does. He bathes, he fasts, and he issues a manifesto. He issues this at the temple of the divine figure Xuannu.
Right, the goddess.
Yeah. And he lays out this horrifying situation in writing, noting that his elite feather forest guards were slaughtered. And then he essentially offers a contract right. Like he says, if Xuannu destroys this demon, he will ensure her temple and her image are immortalized forever.
The choice of the word she is vital here, actually.
How so?
Well, in ancient Chinese political and military tradition, a she is not just a prayer. It's a martial manifesto.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a call to arms or a formal declaration of grievance that you'd use to rally forces against a usurper or an enemy of the state. So by issuing a she to the heavens, the king of Daqin is not just begging for mercy.
He's making a legal case.
Exactly. He is formally filing a legal and military grievance within the cosmic bureaucracy. He's arguing that the demon's presence is an illegal violation of the natural order.
Wow, that's a very specific distinction.
It is. And furthermore, the purification ritual you mentioned, the fasting and the bathing, that is the necessary stripping away of his earthly identity.
Because he can't go to the gods as a king.
Right. He cannot approach the divine court wearing the robes of a mortal king. Because in the eyes of the gods, mortal kingship is just a temporary, localized phenomenon.
I'm struggling with the transactional nature of this whole thing, though.
It is very transactional.
Because he's telling a supreme divine entity, hey, you do the pest control and I'll build you a bigger temple. It feels less like a spiritual awakening and more like he's trying to bribe the universe.
I can see why it looks that way.
Is that how Taoist divine politics actually worked? Because it seems incredibly cynical for a religious text.
Well, it is deeply pragmatic, which is a hallmark of the celestial hierarchy in these narratives. The gods in this pantheon require incense. They require belief and temples to maintain their influence and their tether to the mortal realm.
So they need the humans just as much.
In a way, yes. The king understands this economy. He is invoking his own mandate of heaven. If you look at the text, he begins the document by establishing his credential.
Like a resume.
Basically, he says, I've worked hard. The realm is mostly at peace. I have upheld my end of the cosmic bargain. He is telling Xuannu that the system is broken, and if she wants the system to continue providing her with worship and tribute, she needs to step in and fix the bug.
So it's less a bribe and more negotiation between a branch manager and corporate headquarters.
That's a great way to put it.
He's saying, look, I'm running the franchise well, but there's a literal monster in the lobby eating the employees. If you want this location to stay open and keep generating revenue, you need to send security.
Yes, exactly.
But the specific details he includes in this Shia, they are so visceral.
Right.
He mentions the queen being thrown into the cold palace, the concubines being defiled, and the 7 temples of his ancestors being shamed.
Yeah, and the cold palace is a very specific term. It's the place where disgraced royals were banished.
Like a place of social death.
Exactly, a place of isolation and social death. So by putting the queen there, the demon hasn't just kidnapped a person, it has frozen the royal lineage.
Oh, wow.
And defiling the inner palace and shaming the 7 temples, that means the demon has corrupted the past, the ancestors, and the future, which is the lineage.
It's the complete erasure.
Right. The king is illustrating that the demon is actively unraveling the conceptual order of human civilization, and the slaughter of the Feather Forest Guards, the Yulin, is the final proof of that.
Because they were the best of the best.
Historically, the Yulin were the most elite, highly trained imperial bodyguards. Their destruction proves that human martial prowess has reached its absolute limit.
It just makes me think of a massive, modern multinational corporation. Like, imagine they have the absolute best cybersecurity team. Money can buy their own digital Feather Forest Guards.
I love that analogy.
And then a catastrophic zero-day exploit hits.
Yeah.
The entire system is locked, the engineers are totally helpless, and the CEO has to go onto a dark web forum to find some legendary rogue hacker.
Affirm whatever they want.
Quite offering them a board seat and unlimited funding just to get the company back online. The king is admitting that the rules of his reality no longer apply, and he needs a specialist who operates on a completely different frequency.
And that transition from relying on internal systems to seeking external specialized intervention, it requires a profound ego death for a leader.
He has to swallow his pride.
Immense pride. The king has to publicly document his own impotence. He has to swallow the pride of his ancestors and declare his absolute vulnerability. The Shi acts as the bridge, translating that mortal terror into a structured administrative format that the celestial bureaucracy can process.
So the king files his cosmic grievance. He's done the rituals, he humbled himself, he offered the ultimate reward and sent this document out into the ether. You would expect the heavens to open up with righteous fury immediately, right?
You'd think so.
Like a thunderbolt, an angelic army, something. But what actually happens when that document hits the celestial inbox is baffling. It's where this mythological epic suddenly turns into a workplace comedy of errors.
It really does introduce a sharp dose of bureaucratic realism. So Xuannu, the Nine Heavens profound girl, who is a revered goddess of war strategy and esoteric martial arts, she receives the plea.
Okay.
She looks down from the clouds, gets a visual on the chaos in Dakin, and instantly identifies the culprit. She knows exactly what this monster is. It is the green ox.
So it's not a generic demon of the abyss, but a known entity.
A known entity with a highly visible owner. Because Xuannu is a supreme martial goddess, she possesses the immense power required to smite this beast instantly.
She could just end it right there.
The text makes it clear the problem is technically solvable with a single strike from her, but she doesn't strike. She pauses.
Wait, why?
Well, the text explicitly states she refrains from acting because killing the beast would be inconvenient or disrespectful to its owner.
And who is the owner?
Laojun.
Wait, Laojun. As in Taisheng Laojun, the deified form of Laozi, one of the 3 pure ones.
The very same.
The absolute top tier of the Taoist pantheon.
He is essentially a foundational pillar of the cosmos in this theology.
Okay, so Xuannu, instead of saving the dying mortals, engages in interdepartmental diplomacy.
Exactly.
She writes like a simplified bamboo slip or a letter, and she dispatches a messenger to Laojun's realm just to give him a polite heads up about what his pet is doing.
That is exactly what happens.
I'm sorry, but that makes Xuannu sound like a terrible deity.
It definitely paints her in a specific light.
I mean, if she is the goddess of war and justice, why isn't she fighting? The king's guards are dead, the queen is freezing in a dungeon, the kingdom is totally traumatized, and Xuannu's first thought is, oh, I better not step on Laojun's toes. It might make the next celestial banquet awkward.
Right. She's worried about office politics.
She is literally letting mortals suffer and die to save face at the office. Why should we, or the people of Daikin, respect her for this?
What's fascinating here is that your frustration is completely justified from a moral perspective, and that friction is exactly what the author intends. But you have to view this through the lens of cosmic seismiancy and the preservation of the ultimate hierarchy.
So her reputation up there is more important.
To Xuannu, the mortal realm is transient. Kings rise and fall. But a conflict between her and Laojun that could tear the very fabric of the universe apart.
Oh, I see.
If she executes Laojun's mount without his permission, it is a direct insult to his authority as a supreme deity.
So it's the cosmic equivalent of diplomatic immunity.
It is the absolute apex of diplomatic immunity. The rules of engagement and the alliances among the gods completely supersede the acute, immediate suffering of the mortal.
Which is horrifying for the mortals.
It is, but it forces us to confront how institutional hierarchies prioritize their own internal stability over external efficiency. Xuannu is operating on a scale where political capital is far more valuable than mortal lives.
Wow.
The demon is committing atrocities, yes, but unauthorized violence against a peer's property would cause a rift in heaven, which is a far more serious existential threat than a mortal king sitting in a cave.
That is incredibly cynical, but I see the logic.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine you find a massive, vicious dog tearing up your neighborhood playground. Kids are screaming, fences are breaking. You're holding a tranquilizer gun, and you're about to shoot the dog to end the threat. But right as you pull the trigger, you see the dog's collar, and you realize it belongs to the mayor or the president of the United States.
That changes things completely.
Suddenly, you lower the gun. You can't just shoot the president's dog. You have to call the Secret Service. You have to navigate the political fallout. You have to send a carefully worded message.
Meanwhile, the playground is being destroyed.
Right.
And that's exactly it. The protocol paralyzes the solution. Institutions create these protocols to protect themselves from internal friction.
It's self-preservation.
Think of any complex human organization. A government, a massive hospital, a university. The solution to a localized problem might be completely obvious to the people on the ground, but the system demands that the proper forms be filed, the correct executives be CC'd, and the chain of command be respected even as the metaphorical fire burns.
So Xuannu isn't fixing the problem. She's just escalating the ticket to the correct department. But she does realize she has an angry client waiting for a response, right? I mean, the king is down there fasting, having promised her a massive temple. She can't just leave him on read while she waits for Laojun to check his messages.
No, she has to do some ground-level crisis management to stall for time.
Right. So what does she do?
While her messenger is navigating the celestial bureaucracy to deliver this polite complaint, Xuannu visits the king of Daikin. But she doesn't appear in waking reality. She visits him in a Nanki dream.
A Nanki dream. That's a very specific idiom, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It comes from that Tang Dynasty story about the man who falls asleep under an ash tree, and he dreams of living an entire life as the governor of the Nanki kingdom.
An entire lifetime of prestige and power.
Right, and then he wakes up and realizes the whole kingdom was just an ant colony in the roots of the tree.
The inclusion of that specific term is brilliant, because by framing the king's divine visitation as a Nanki dream, the text is quietly reminding us of the ultimate scale of things.
Putting the king in his place.
Exactly. To the king, Daikin is the center of the universe. But to Xuannu and Laojun, Daikin is just an ant colony in the roots of a tree. It underscores the fragility and the somewhat illusory nature of mortal power.
That is a brutal metaphysical demotion. So in this ant colony dream, what does she actually tell him?
She gives him instructions that seem entirely counterintuitive. She tells him to rally his army the next day and physically attack the demon, and she promises that she has a method to subdue the creature when the time comes.
Okay, I have to challenge this.
Go for it.
Why? Why make the mortals do this?
Right.
We just established that Xuannu has the magic to paralyze or kill this thing right now. We also established that the demon already casually slaughtered the elite Feather Forest guards.
The best fighters they had.
Right. So she tells the king, who is already deeply traumatized, to wake up and march standard infantry at a magical beast. It sounds like she's just using them as bait.
Well, from a purely tactical standpoint against a supernatural entity, standard infantry is entirely useless.
Yeah.
But from a psychological and political standpoint, this deployment is absolutely essential for the survival of the state.
How so?
Xuannu is orchestrating the restoration of mortal agency. Think about it. The king was kidnapped, his palace was taken, his lineage was frozen, he was rendered completely impotent.
He lost everything.
If Xuannu simply snaps her fingers from the clouds and the demon vanishes, the king remains weak. His authority in the eyes of his subjects is permanently shattered because he relied entirely on a ghost to save him.
Ah, I see. He needs to be seen taking his own house back.
He needs the theater of power. By telling him to march, Xuannu is forcing him to stand up, put his armor back on, and act like a sovereign. And notice his reaction when he wakes up.
What does he do?
He doubts the dream, his confidence is gone, he questions whether marching is suicide. It is his ministers who have to rally around him and assure him it's divine sign.
That dynamic between the king and the ministers is fascinating because the leader's internal compass is totally broken by the trauma of the kidnapping. But the machinery of the state, the advisors, they push him forward. They use faith in the established system, even a magical one, to force the king to act like a king again.
The collective belief of the administration bolsters the failing leader. So the king follows the dream's instructions. He mobilizes a staggering force, 200,000 troops.
200,000.
And they march on the palace, completely surrounding the beast, which is currently holding this obscene revelry inside the royal halls.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. 200,000 men against one ox. It highlights the absurdity of the power scaling here.
It's totally disproportionate.
It reminds me of the concept of busy work during a massive crisis. Have you ever noticed that?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes leadership will deploy massive resources, mobilizing entire agencies, setting up endless task forces, demanding daily reports from thousands of employees, knowing full well those specific actions won't actually solve the core issue.
But they do it anyway.
Right, because taking massive visible action prevents panic. It gives a terrified populace something to look at. The soldiers surrounding the palace aren't really there to kill the ox. They're there to prove to themselves that Dawkins still has an army.
Yes, it creates a containment zone. The act of surrounding the corrupted palace reestablishes the boundary between the chaos inside and the order outside. It stops the psychological bleeding of the kingdom.
So the theater of power is fully staged. You have 200,000 nervous soldiers gripping their spears, staring down their own palace. The trap is laid. And then the narrative tension just snaps. The demon is interrupted during its revelry, and it doesn't just charge out the front door. We get an incredible elemental magical clash.
Right. The demon is highly irritated by the interruption. And instead of using physical force, it utilizes high-level magic. It spits a mouthful of what the text calls law water or magic water.
Okay.
But as this water hurtles toward the kin army, it transforms in midair. It turns into fire wheels and fire crows, blazing projectiles raining down on the mortal soldiers.
Water transforming into fire crows. The imagery is terrifying. I want to drill down into the mechanics of this magic, though.
Let's do it.
Because in Taoist cosmology, you have the Wu Jing, the 5 elements wood, fire, earth, metal, water. They have a strict cycle of generation and overcoming. Water is supposed to extinguish fire. How is the demon turning water into fire?
That is exactly why this magic is so horrifying within the context of the text. The demon's attack is a fundamental subversion of nature. By taking water, the element of quenching, of descending energy, and perverting it into fire, the element of consumption of rising energy, the demon is inverting the natural order of the universe.
They're breaking the rule.
It shows that this creature doesn't just break the laws of the kingdom, it breaks the laws of physics. It is pure mutating chaos.
It's the ultimate unpredictable threat. You raise your shield to block a splash of water, and suddenly you are covered in magical fire.
The army must be in utter disarray.
Panic everywhere. But this is the moment Xuannu finally steps in to fulfill her end of the dream contract, right?
Yes. The text describes it quite simply, actually. A woman appears in the sky holding pure water. She sprinkles it down over the battlefield, and it instantly extinguishes the magical, unnatural fire of the demon.
So puts it out.
Right. And then she acts against the ox itself. But again, notice her restraint here. She holds a sword, but she doesn't swing it. She simply points the sword at the green ox, freezing it in its true form.
Wait, why a sword if she's just going to point it? Why not just a wand or her hand?
Well, in Taoist ritual practice, a sword ajin is not merely a weapon for hacking and slashing.
Okay.
It is an instrument of cosmic command. It channels qi and divine authority. By pointing it, she isn't trying to inflict physical damage, which we know would anger Laojun.
Right, the diplomatic immunity.
Exactly. She is using the sword's authority to strip away the demon's illusions. She forces it to drop the shape-shifting and the chaotic magic, locking it into its Menacing, its true original form.
So she counters the demon's high-level mutating chaos with basically a divine sprinkler system and a cosmic laser pointer.
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
I love the contrast here. The demon is throwing a chaotic tantrum, twisting the elements. But Xuannu doesn't meet chaos with more chaos. She doesn't summon a bigger fire or a magical tsunami. She uses pure water to restore the natural law. She uses the sword to define the enemy.
Because escalating chaos with more chaos rarely works, whether you're in ancient mythology or modern crisis management.
The great point.
When you face an overwhelming problem that seems to be constantly shifting shape like water, turning to fire crows, the instinct is to panic and throw everything you have at it. But Xuannu demonstrates a mature, precise application of power. The most effective solution is to strip away the noise.
That is a phenomenal lesson for diagnosing a crisis. Think about a massive disaster at work. The initial failure happens, and immediately rumors start, secondary systems fail. People start panicking and blaming each other.
Fire crows.
Those are the fire crows, exactly. The core problem is hidden behind mutating chaos. If you can metaphorically point your sword at it and say, stop changing, what exactly is the root failure here? You freeze the problem. You strip away the illusions. And once it's just an ox, it's still dangerous, but it's a known quantity. You can manage a known quantity.
You shift the engagement from the realm of the emotional and unpredictable back to the realm of the rational.
Right.
However, pinning the problem down doesn't actually solve it.
Oh, right. It's still there.
The demon is immobilized in its true form, but it is still physically sitting in the middle of the Dakin Palace, surrounded by 200,000 terrified troops. To see how the threat is actually removed, the narrative violently yanks our perspective away from the smoke of the battlefield all the way up to the highest celestial penthouse. We must look at Laojun.
Right, the owner of the beast.
Yeah.
The one who has the diplomatic immunity. While his pet has been slaughtering guards and freezing queens, what have Laojun been doing this whole time?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Laojun is residing in his hall in the pure Dharma realm. The text implies he is already somewhat aware that his ox is missing, perhaps looking into it casually.
Oh, just casually looking into it.
Yeah. Then Xuannu's messenger arrives and delivers the cloud letter.
Let's read the room on this cloud letter.
Yeah.
What does it actually say? Because you called it a polite complaint earlier, but I imagine gods have a way of throwing shade that is mathematically precise.
It is a masterclass in passive-aggressive, bureaucratic communication.
Oh, I love that.
The letter draws a glaring contrast. It essentially states, you Do Sheng reside up here in the pure Dharma realm, while your green ox is down below acting as a toxic poison to the kingdom of Darien. And then it asks one simple cutting question.
Which is...
Why hasn't it returned for so long?
Oh, that is sharp. It's like saying, I see you're enjoying your pristine meditation while your property is committing war crimes. You mentioned he is in the pure Dharma realm, King Jing. What does that actually mean in this context?
A pure realm is by definition insulated from the red dust Hongshan of the mortal world.
Red dust.
Yes, the red dust represents human suffering, emotion, dirt, and chaos. Laojun's realm is entirely detached from the visceral horror his negligence has caused below. The wording of Xuannu's letter is a polite but incredibly sharp reprimand about this exact disconnect. It holds a mirror up to the isolation of supreme leadership.
And how does the apex of the Taoist pantheon react to being called out like this? Does he rush down in a panic to apologize to the king?
His reaction is almost comical in its understatement. The text says Laojun sighs.
He sighs. 200,000 mortals, mobilized a queen, tortured guards, dead. And he gives it a sigh.
He sighs, claims he had absolutely no idea the beast was causing such horrific harm, and then delegates the cleanup. He doesn't go himself. He sends his disciple, Xujia.
Xujia. Now, who is this guy in the broader lore? Because he's about to perform the most frustratingly effortless feat in the entire story.
Xujia frequently appears in Taoist lore as Lao Zi's servant or the driver of his ox cart. He is, for all intents and purposes, the staff, the intern.
So the intern arrives at Dakin. Remember the scene here. You have an entire kingdom, mobilize the smell of burnt magic in the air, a traumatized monarch, an immobilized monster.
A literal war zone.
A war zone.
Yeah.
And Xujia walks into this theater of war. Does he draw a weapon?
He doesn't fight at all. He simply walks up to the terrifying demon, shouts once, slaps a single paper talisman onto the ox's back, locks it, and casually leads it away at the east gate.
I am absolutely floored by the disparity of effort here. The mortals fought a literal war. They fasted, they prayed, they lost their greatest warriors, they mobilized a whole nation. And the owner's intern shows up with a magic sticky note, slaps it on the ox, and ends the entire conflict in 5 seconds.
The paper talisman, the Fu, is the key here. It isn't a weapon, it is a piece of cosmic code. It represents the original authority of the creator.
It is exactly like having root-level access in a computer system.
That's a perfect analogy.
Think about a massive company dealing with a rogue AI or a devastating virus. The end users, the employees, they're out there fighting the symptoms. They're dealing with crashed servers, corrupted data screens, catching on fire, the digital fire crows.
Right. They're just reacting.
They fight for weeks and lose billions. And then the original developer, the person who wrote the base code 10 years ago, walks into the server room. They don't fight the virus. They open a command prompt, type in a master password, hit enter, and the entire rogue system just powers down.
The mortals and even Xuannu are interacting with the demon as an external hostile entity. They are restricted to the end-user experience fighting its outputs. But Shujia possesses the creator's bypass.
Faster password.
Right. The ox recognizes the talisman's authority instantly because it is programmed into its very nature. There is no battle because in the face of root authority, there is no question of hierarchy.
This presents a fascinating question for how we deal with insurmountable problems. When you are fighting a crisis, are you just out there swinging a sword at fire crows, exhausting your energy managing symptoms of a system you don't control? Or do you have the talisman? Do you have the root level access, or at least the right contact, to just walk up and turn the problem off at its source?
And often we don't have that access. We are bound to a realm much like the king. But the crucial leadership skill demonstrated here is recognizing when a problem requires an escalation to someone who does have that access.
Yes, exactly.
The king's initial manifesto, as humiliating as it was the correct move. He recognized he lacked the root access and successfully initiated a chain of events that contacted the administrator who could reach the developer.
So the intern leaves the demon out the east gate. The supernatural pressure in the air vanishes. The magic is gone. The mortals are left standing in the rubble of their palace, gripping their weapons. What happens next? How does a king recover from this?
The narrative resolution is incredibly swift, and it immediately grounds itself back in human rituals. The text states the palace is pacified. The king returns to his inner palace. He goes to the cold palace and frees his queen. He physically organizes and restores order to the royal household.
It's a complete symmetrical reversal of the crisis.
Yes, it is.
Because the disruption was violent and unnatural right. The king was removed, the queen frozen, the ancestors shamed, and the recovery is methodical and entirely human. The king is back, the queen is free, the house is cleaned.
Exactly. The human domain reasserts itself. And crucially, the king honors the contract he made in his manifesto. He grants formal titles to Xuannu, he massively expands her temple and her physical image, and he throws a grand night banquet to celebrate.
The invoice is paid. But I find it astonishing that there is no lingering resentment mentioned. The gods drag their feet. They cared more about Laojun's feelings than the dead guards. They made the mortal army act as psychological bait. Yet the story ends on this incredibly tidy, festive note. A banquet.
It does seem strange, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, why isn't the king furious? Why isn't he drafting a secondary she, complaining about the unacceptable response time?
Because lingering on the unfairness of the cosmic bureaucracy serves no purpose for a ruler who needs to project stability. The king is a pragmatist.
He knows where he stands.
He does. The universe is inherently unequal. The gods have power, mortals do not. Complaining about the rain doesn't fix the roof. We often focus entirely on surviving the acute phase of a crisis, the fighting. But this ending emphasizes the critical importance of the aftermath.
Cleaning up the mess.
Cleaning house. Fulfilling your obligations to those who helped you, even if their help was bogged down in red tape. And most importantly, taking a moment like the banquet to consciously celebrate survival. It's a necessary psychological reset to remind the kingdom that human life continues even after touching the divine.
A psychological reset. That is a perfect way to frame it.